Leah Katznelson, an Emmy nominee for Fleishman Is in Trouble. Mitchell Travers, an Emmy nominee for George and Tammy. Sharon Long, an Emmy nominee for The Great. Donna Zakowska, an Emmy nominee for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Dominique Dawson, an Emmy nominee for Swarm. And Laura Montgomery, an Emmy nominee for What We Do in the Shadows. All incredible costume designers. Congratulations all. And I guess I just wanted to start as costume designers. If somebody was coming up to you, a younger person or even maybe older, wanted to do this for a living and decided they wanted to be a costume designer, like what kind of advice would you give them, or where would you tell them maybe to start? Leah, I'll start with you and we could go around.
I mean, I think I would start with that there isn't one singular path on finding your way through this industry. I think if you probably asked every one of us, we would have come to it from a different background. My degree is in architecture, so I certainly apply a lot of the same concepts of materiality and color and scale and texture and things that I would if I were designing interiors or a building, but on a smaller, human scale. So I think I would probably say, bring what your interests are, don't shy away from it because it might not be what you studied. I think if you have an interest in art, literature, history, language, anthropology, sociology, any of those fields, you can, we draw on those resources all of the time when developing characters. So bring everything in and jump in, and it's not too late to start.
That's great. Mitchell, what would you say?
I would definitely, it should come with a warning label because it's a career, not a job. I think it's something that you have to constantly work at and continue your education throughout your life so that you're ready for different periods, different subject matters, different body types, different brands. So I just think you have to be ready to do it all the time. It's not something that you can turn off.
I think that's great. Yeah, I love that it's a career, not a job. I think that's really cool. I think that applies to a lot of really great careers, probably, right? Sharon, how about you? What would you?
I'd agree with both of them, actually. Yes, it isn't. It is a career, not a job. And I do think that a love of people and the way they wear their clothes and why they wear the clothes the way they do is really important. I think looking all the time is important, and not just being kind of quite closed in or just say historical, or it's a huge world, I think. And
yeah, for sure. No, yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, Donna, what would you say?
Well, I think I would say you have to love clothes. You have to love costumes to begin with. I think you have to want to be a storyteller, because I think that's what we do. We are storytellers with clothes. And, the first thing to do is to really be an assistant. I mean, you really have to assist. You have to learn and objectively see what this profession is about, because it's a pretty big commitment and it's pretty difficult and it does take a lot of work. So I think it really is about your heart and loving it. And, as I say, being interested in life and stories and people, and knowing that you can be a storyteller, also, and, and just enthusiastic about it, really, no matter how hard.
Dominique, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say, just to piggyback off of, there's not always one track, but I think the importance of wanting to connect with people and better understand, the human condition is really, really key. Having the patience to listen and observe people. I love going like traveling, but even just within my own city, just going to neighborhoods that I'm not so familiar with and just sitting down and watching, because you can get so much inspiration from just somebody walking down the street. But, at the end of the day, you're so intimate with the talent. And so it's you and them, and it's really about how can you service them? And I try to come at it from a service place, but yeah, how can we better connect? I would say how can you better connect with people and really be honest and authentic in that connection?
Yeah. And Laura, last but not least, what would you say?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everyone has said. Leah, my degree is in French literature, and people often ask, like, do you use that? And to a certain degree, like, yes, it informs my research practices and my curiosity. And then I think to answer the question very specifically of where would I advise someone to start, I would advise them to start at the bottom. I think that it's important to try to do, you don't even have to do them well, but do every job within the costume department, because sometimes along the way you might find, oh, I'm actually more interested in being a textile artist, but working on set, working as a buyer, working as a sewer, because then once you get into the design position, I'm not a great sewer, but I know what I'm asking for when I'm asking the cutter to make a dress that, you know, I'm thinking about how do you get into this dress, or where can the zipper go, or you're thinking about construction. If a buyer has had experience working on set, they know they're never going to bring back a scarf that has a pattern that will be impossible to keep good continuity on. Yeah, and just knowing all of the aspects, because you're going to be directing this team and they're representing you. So I think it's important as a respect for what they do, and it makes you better to know, like, have a basic understanding of what everyone's job on your team is.
Yeah. You all kind of spoke about this in your individual interviews, and I guess I'd love to hear just a little more about like how you work with the actors and like how you kind of like help each, and obviously I'm sure it's every actor is different, like we've said, and like how you kind of like make sure you're providing them with what they need and like building out the characters, like you said, like Donna said, like you guys are storytellers, like, and telling these stories with the actors to make sure the character is coming through. Laura, we could start with you since you went last there first, but we could go to you first and we'll go back around.
That's such an important part of the job for me, is collaboration with the actors, because as much as I'm thinking about the character and the story, and I might have had conversations with the writers, the actor is also doing their own work and thinking about, and I think it can be a really fruitful conversation about the backstory, because it's always, when you're telling a story and you're creating a character, it's the choices of the clothing. Where do the clothes come from? I saw an interview with Anne Roth at the Academy Museum, and she was saying she wants to know, is this a person who hangs up their clothing, or is the clothing in a pile on the floor? And so I think it helps to inform, obviously there are the specifics about their bodies and what they're comfortable with, but really you're building the character together. And I think for the actor to be able to feel like they can embody this character in an authentic way, then it's a collaboration and you make it together.
Mm-hmm. Dominique, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I really heavily rely on images and illustrations to really convey the passion that I have for our world, right? So I work with the talent to really help them understand the world. And, you know, of course, they're meeting with the director and the other castmates, of course, but in terms of tone, and the intention of what the costumes are going to be doing, right, with this particular production. So to me, that's the best time, when, you know, it's not all about deadlines. It's like we can really vibe together and they can connect with me. And that's really the get to know you time. And I feel like it's at those moments that they learn to trust me too, you know, because they see all the work that's I've poured into it, and they get to match me with all their, you know, objective work and stuff that they've done. So that's usually where the synergy starts.
Yeah, for sure. Donna, you obviously worked with a lot of the Maisel cast for 5 seasons. So I guess like, yeah, like how do you approach like working with them, and like certainly like how did you kind of just, how did you do it?
Well, I think it's everything that everyone has said. I mean, beginning with images, beginning with research. It's an intimate situation. You always, as a costume designer, you have something in your mind that you'd like to do, but you want to be sure that the actor is going to feel comfortable to some degree. And if they don't quite feel comfortable, then you have to find a route to make them comfortable. And maybe sometimes you have to convince them that they may have not thought of that, you know, so you can't expect them to be, you've spent, you know, hours and hours looking at research, and they just walk into a room. So I think it's, being as inspiring as you can be, being as open to them as a person, and, having faith in the nature of everyone was talking about the collaboration, because when the collaboration goes well, it's a fantastic experience. I mean, we always feel really very good about that. So, I think that's, really all of these factors we've talked about.
Yeah. Sharon, would you agree with all that?
Yeah, I would agree with it all. And I have had a couple of instances where the conversation was the first point where the first fitting wasn't a fitting, it was a conversation. And I learned things about the character that I didn't know, and it was really important then. This is not necessarily in the great, but then to go forward and to design the costume with that information, which I think the collaboration is all important, really.
Yeah.
Otherwise
Mitchell,
you're in a vacuum, and yeah.
That's great. Mitchell, how about you?
Sometimes I feel like I'm hosting a party as a costume designer, because I know everybody, but the process for an actor is often lonely because they're doing so much work with the scripts by themselves and their preparation. And so we get to invite them into the rooms that we've already helped build and make sure they're dressed appropriately, that they work in the scene, that we can take kernels of information we've received in fittings from other actors and help include them in the process. So I sometimes feel like that's our job, is just to keep people comfortable and keep people communicating throughout all departments, because we are the link between departments like props, cinematography, hair and makeup, director, locations. Like we kind of hold all the keys. So it's really nice to get to help them open each door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Leah, last but not least.
I mean, I agree with everything everyone said thus far, but often we as the costume design team are the first representatives of production that a lot of the cast meet in person. They may have had conversations with the directors or with the writer, but their first sort of real entry point into becoming that character is often in our fitting room or in those phone calls and our conversations. So, respecting the vulnerability that is in that space of knowing, they're coming in, they're taking their clothes off in front of someone they've just met 5 minutes earlier and becoming somebody else is a big transformation. And so I think having real respect for that transition for them as well during that collaboration is really imperative.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but I just want to ask one last thing, I guess, would be like, as costume designers, are you looking at other people's works? It does not have to be someone on here, and you don't have, like, if you don't even want to answer, I guess you don't, but have you seen something recently that you were like, oh, that really stood out to me as like a really great, feat of costuming that you were like maybe inspired by, or just was like, oh, that was like really, really notably good, I guess, beyond accepting that all of your work qualifies for this. But I guess just like in general, beyond that, Leah, like what would you say, I guess?
All the time, I'd say.
Yeah.
All the time. It's great.
Yeah, Dominique mentioned, you're always looking, you're always sort of, I'm such a nosy person. So I feel like as a costume designer, it gives me room to stare and to pay attention, to the details. So I think, watching everybody, there's such a diverse range of work that can be inspiring, whether it's a choice of a color palette that's really significant, like in Her or something like that, where it's so specific and important to the storytelling, to, I don't know, Transparent, like watching, Catherine Hahn as a character playing the rabbi and feeling like, I believe this woman exists in my universe and I know that lady, So I think there's so many opportunities for there to be interesting moments for inspiration. And I'm in awe of everybody's work here. I mean, it's so lovely to hear everybody talk, but you hear your own stories within what everyone's saying. You're like, oh, this is a real community. It's one I'm proud to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And Mitchell, how about you?
I'm always so inspired by contemporary costumes, because I feel like so often in our industry, the period work gets the most amount of attention, but it's the same amount of effort, it's the same amount of fittings, and it's the same amount of clothes often. When it's done beautifully, I always respect that, and I just feel that it deserves as much credit as, you know, the hoop skirts. It's the same.
Yeah, no, it's very true. So Sharon, you said you like frequently like looking at things that are
Yes.
you're enjoying. Can you think of?
Yeah,
can you think
and
of-
I would completely agree about the contemporary. When you see something, I mean, it's always been a kind of laughable thing that if you watch something and you almost don't notice the costumes because they're so good, because the characters are so believable, it's ignored as in terms of kind of competition and things. But it's really, really important, that sort of work. And when it's sometimes there's a contemporary, say, low budget, I'm trying to think of something that I've seen recently, and I just kind of thought the costumes were so perfect for the job. And there was a small amount of costumes, and they weren't what you would call really exciting costumes, but they were just brilliant. So it's not always the big, the sort of show work that I think we notice.
Yeah, definitely. Donna, how about you?
Well, it's always hard to be specific about anything, you know. I think the thing is I see so many different things. You know, I love to watch everyone else's work, and I always find within that work so many elements that, you know, especially when it's an element you didn't expect and that person makes an interesting choice. And I think, you know, as a costume designer, you begin to start accumulating these things, you know, from whoever, Milena Condenera to whoever. And then you begin to, these things really inspire you and become a part of how you approach your work. And there is usually within everyone's work, you know, some very special choices that have been made. And I think whenever I see those and I am excited by them, it sort of becomes a part of my own visual vocabulary. And it's always like very thrilling, you know, but there are so many things and so many facets in people's work. It's you know, it's impossible, I think, to just say that or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, you know, the turn of the century to the 40s. It's all there, you know, and you put it all together, and that's your inspiration, really.
Yeah, no, it's very, very true. Dominique, how about you?
I mean, I love both ends of the spectrum, you know. I love a grandiose, Liberace, surreal, Moulin Rouge type of vibe, very stylized, you know, like that is so much fun. But I think recently, what I've seen on the other end of the spectrum is I'm a Virgo, which was directed by Boots Riley, and I'm from the Bay Area. It's set in Oakland, and it's just, you know, the tale of this 13-foot tall Black boy, you know, and like, and how his clothes have to be patched together just to create garments big enough for him, and just the whole vibe of the Bay and how funky and eclectic their style is. They really captured it and nailed it. And so, especially when you're from somewhere and you can be like, that's my city, that feels really good.
Yeah, for sure. And Laura, last but not least.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love when you get, and I try to kind of tap into a feeling of nostalgia. I'll try to base characters on people that I know or people from my own life. And I think if it's making me feel something, then I hope it will make the viewer feel something or make the actor feel something, because it connects to an experience that you've had. And then in terms of, I just saw the movie Oppenheimer, and the costumes are beautiful in that movie. And there was just one detail that stood out to me that I thought it was very authentic and perfect. There's this scene where Robert Downey Jr. is walking away from the camera, and he never takes the suit. I don't know how, I think you might only see it once and in a very short scene. He doesn't take the jacket off, but you can see the outline of his suspenders through the back of the jacket. You just kind of see that bump, and seeing the bump, I was like, I know what that is. That's the suspenders, which just brought it all together. I was like, it's right for the period. It showed the drape and the weight of the fabric, because he's a character who is wealthy. So it's obvious that it's a nice wool, it's a lightweight wool. And I just thought in that one little shadow of the bump of a suspender buckle in the back, it told me so much about this character. And then that was it. It was 2 seconds.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is really, that's great. And I think that's a testament to the costume designers, and certainly like we've talked about here, all of your work here is just incredible this year, all Emmy nominated. One last time, Leah Katznelson for Fleishman Is in Trouble, Mitchell Travers for George and Tammy, Sharon Long for The Great, Donna Zakowska for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Dominique Dawson for Swarm, and Laura Montgomery for What We Do in the Shadows. Thank you all so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you all.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Me too.